So now that I've got your attention,
week 8.
I'm going to show you one more slide on this whole alpha thing.
Right, and that's not something that we can make.
So-
Right now, lead acid is the king, that's what we have.
The top
And
says that
it's what we have enough
hydro,
materials to make. There are enough natural resources to make those. But break that down and think about it. Let's say we had a town
very
the
tiny.
size of
We've got our own Gordon View children, right?
I'm guessing Frenchtown or Bonner, they have, I'm just gonna use a town of 1,000 residents, right? So let's say we have 1,000 residents, there are 400 homes.
0.34
Is exactly 400 homes in that town.
Watts per degree.
Each one of those has a minimum of
Expensive.
18 batteries. How many batteries is that? Just
Sell
for that
it,
one
you make
town?
it, and, or sorry, when electricity expensive, you sell
A
it.
bunch,
And when
a bunch.
it's cheap, you
Let's break it down, let's make it smaller so we can keep our numbers simple. There's 100 houses in a town. That's 1,800 batteries
solar.
at $100 a piece.
Sends the water.
And they're only good for 6 years.
Here comes the rain down.
But so 1,800 batteries. I'm going to need 5 battery changes during the lifetime of my solar array for those.
Excess and say.
And all of a sudden now, on what's 5 times 18?
What this means, or you can make it on solar.
90,000?
That I just put out there.
So I need,
Another sustainability, I mentioned that. As I was.
I'm sorry, 9,000. Pretty close to. So I need 9,000 batteries just for a city of 100 homes.
Old biomass.
And start combining that across the whole United States, you can see where, okay, lead acid batteries are not gonna do it.
Innovation. Buy low, sell high.
So,
Ramp up, Dr.
now you can see the problem, the grid,
10 parts, well, as I
which, you know, most, 99% of the solar being installed right now is grid connected. And you're dumping that electricity into the grid, which is great because it actually times out just about right that our highest electricity demand on the grid is the same time as the sun is shining. We don't need much electricity at 2 a.m. other than the people getting up to go to the bathroom, or the furnace kicking on, or something like that. But that number is greatly reduced compared to everybody at the shopping mall.
So.
All the factories that are up and running
Right
using
here,
electricity.
of.
So those numbers are greatly reduced during that time.
Okay, so is 7 out
That's
of
great.
9 gallons.
But think of
The next little set of
think of the
things I
grid
want to talk about
as
more sort of
a 5-gallon bucket with water.
So to get back,
And
get back to basics.
you have to keep it exactly level with the top. If I put in too much electricity, it overflows, that's bad. If I don't put in enough electricity or enough water, it's low, and there's not enough water to do what I need to do. Electricity works the same way, and the grid has this constant balance all the time, that it has to meet exactly the demand.
So.
And they can do that with a generator or wind turbines. There's a lot of different ways for them to do that, to keep that bucket exactly level. You know, keeps that electricity exactly the right amount.
Now,
And now all of a sudden you go out and you put 4 kilowatts on your roof.
some other.
You're like, oh, hey, here's some more water. And they're like, oh crap, now I gotta adjust.
Loses that.
And that's one person doing it, you know what, and one person doing
Competition
it,
looks
or
like
even 10 houses in a grid the size of Missoula, not really a big
That's your
deal.
through variable, that's your.
But, yeah, the more and more, if I put them on every single house, now I have, you know, in Missoula, I've got 20,000 homes, all dumping water into that bucket.
Well, the three.
And it doesn't need any more water.
It's, zero.
So,
Saddam Hussein
it seriously messes with the grid.
in 2000.
And we gotta figure out how are we going to manage
Not
that.
unlike converting
Now,
the
wind
BTUs.
and hydroelectric are both great because they're instant on and off for demand. If I need more electricity, I just open the valve a little bit wider on the hydroelectric dam, it makes more electricity, it puts more electricity in the system. If I need less, I just crank down that valve a little bit, it makes a little bit less electricity. Wind turbines, I just flip the switch and turn it off, and it's not making any. And when I need it again, I can flip that switch back on and boom, it's making electricity again.
Take a look
As long as the wind's blowing. So some of the other technologies, and solar is the same way. I mean, you can very easily control solar. as far as its output during the times where the sun is shining, but how do I control that input on somebody's house?
Future for solutions.
I can't, I don't have any control of that system, so I have to adapt my system to keep the bucket from overflowing, because I have no control over what they are doing, or what they're putting into the system.
And,
You know, and then you run into a problem of, okay, well, we have smart meters and we can turn stuff on and off,
get your flow,
But,
times your height, times your
you know, I'm putting in,
times the constants.
twists and some 4 kilowatts, my neighbor's putting in 4 kilowatts, and the next guy's putting in 4 kilowatts. Ultimately, altogether, we're putting in 100 kilowatts.
Author of,
The power company only needs 50 kilowatts. So they're gonna turn off half the homes. Also, wait a minute, I'm not getting credit for my solar, how come that guy's getting credit for it, and I'm not getting credit for mine? So, there's a reason why they can't control it, and we don't really want them to, but
until recently.
that's a huge problem is the grid and how that works. So we've already talked a little bit about storage and how batteries don't work.
Generator efficiency.
But if you look up the definition of battery and what is a battery,
Some inspiration.
it's a way to store energy. We think of a AA battery or a 12-volt car battery.
Flow,
But
1200.
really, a battery is any method to store energy.
You can see.
And it's not specified that it has to be stored. Energy can be stored in other ways.
That's the water horsepower that
And
goes into
probably
the
the biggest one right now that we're
And
looking at
another
as
one,
potential is pump storage. So we did the math on it a couple years ago.
Is
If
only
we had
98%
a tank up on top of Mount Sentinel,
only
it was about the size of the Monessen Library,
much comes out.
right?
Now, if you're using the turbine,
I don't know how many cubic feet,
the
we
turbine
did the
is
math at
the
one
generator,
time.
so this basically takes
Yeah.
the
If we had
fluid power
a tank the size of that library up on top of the mountain,
turns
and
it
every
into
day during the 4 hours, 5 hours of heat sun, when the sun was really shining, we could run pumps and fill that tank with
mechanical linear
water
power,
up there.
and is actually on a.
And then,
linear, this is mechanical rotation.
the rest of the day, we just run off
Here's a
of
couple
that
of details, so.
hydroelectricity by reversing the flow, and just using the gravity to let it create hydroelectric power.
Mechanical linear when the water comes through, mechanical rotational with the turbine, and then
So
electricity.
hydroelectric is the same as solar, but it's just a different.
All right, well, that's, So that's
you
good,
need a
and
little
then
bit
finally,
each way.
conclusions.
It's, well, it's like,
Synthesis.
well,
Linear to rotation.
solar electricity is either on or off. It's just making electricity. There is no storage in that system. It's either making it or it's not.
Changes that I think are occurring,
What you're doing when you pump that
progress.
up to the top of Mount Sentinel, or in any hydroelectric, is you have potential energy.
Kilowatts,
And that energy is stored until you harness that energy.
has also
So,
some of my work.
all that water sitting up there, it's not doing anything. There's no electrical charge to it or anything else. It's just water sitting up there on top of the mountain. Gravity gives it that potential energy. So it has a certain amount of fall, and when it hits the turbine, it transfers that gravitational energy. We harness that to create our energy into electricity.
We don't account for health.
So there's a lot of different methods for doing that.
That's right,
We looked
yes,
at.
I use a software
Wind
just like
energy
that.
is probably more
car.
so than electric, than solar. Solar is very simple, you can count on it every day. We know that the sun's gonna come up every morning, for the most part. If we don't, we've got bigger issues in electricity, so we don't worry about it.
Slowly,
But it's a low density energy, that meaning we need a huge area of solar panels to capture the same amount of energy that I can capture with one wind turbine. Right. So quantities-wise, the energy density of solar is so low that it has a huge footprint.
we know that we
And
can write
I might need 20 acres of solar panels, or 30 acres of solar panels to equal one wind turbine, which uses less than an acre, for that footprint. So because of the energy density, they're looking at a lot of these ideas like pump storage work better with with a wind turbine than they do with a solar panel. And they're looking at, they just built one in Iowa, which just so happens that the stars aligned. The wind conditions are great in western Iowa for a wind farm. And they purposely shopped around for land, doing geological research. They found a giant limestone dome underneath here. I don't know how many 100 feet down it is, but there's this giant dome. And what they're doing is they hook that up to the grid, and it's right next to Interstate 80 going across Iowa. It runs, dumps into the grid, when the wind's blowing. And if the grid's full and they don't need it, out here due to the gas, they turn off the wind turbine. They're like, oh, don't do anything with it. Well, there, they have that option of pump storage. They use that same, they don't turn off the wind turbine, they just use it to run a compressor instead. And they compress air inside that limestone dome. And they've got, this thing's huge. It's probably the size of Missoula or bigger. So they have all these compressors running, and these wind turbines run continuously as long as the wind's blowing, and they're either creating electricity for the grid or going down to that dome and pressurizing it. When it's not blowing, the grid still needs electricity. They can reverse the flow. That compressed air now has energy, and they can use that energy to convert it into electricity to put back into the grid. So we need a new industrial, and it would be at another form of a battery. But it's a compressed air battery, or we have a water battery, pump storage.
Nobel Prize-winning physicist. He deals in science fact.
So there's a lot of different ways to do this that we're studying, we're working with. A friend of mine just sent me something the other night on Facebook of
Instantaneous
iron
efficiency.
ferrite batteries,
You could think of this as sort of
non-toxic. It's just salt water and iron ferrite. Doesn't really do anything. But the difference is, he showed me a house that had a basement or a crawl space that was full of these big 4x4 cubes, and each one of those was a battery. And each one of those was about the equivalent of a little car battery. Now again, we're talking energy density and how dense is the energy. The technology is great because there's no hazardous chemicals or anything in it, but at the same time, it's 50 times or 100 times larger than what that battery is. So I could have a battery bank that's literally the size of this desk with lead acid batteries that would power my entire house. By using those iron saltwater batteries, I fill up an entire 30 by 50 foot basement with those pallets of batteries to do the same thing in the size of this table. So energy storage,
Look back at the history of the 20th.
when it comes right down to it, coal is convenient, gasoline is convenient. The reason we're not breaking away from all these is convenience.
Policy for a lot of countries. And it has, at the same time, it has been sort of fuel for the engine of economic growth.
It's just things to do.
The US is a society built on oil.
No, that's not a too, absolutely.
There's two more questions I have, and then.
Okay.
the height of the curve is pounds. So this represents the peak demand right here.
Even more than 30%.
Area under the curve is like the law.
30% of.
So the price of energy
Reserves are fast running out.
equals
We may already have passed the
I hate to sound pessimistic about it. In our current state of affairs, no.
Our
We will not.
also makes it
Without something catastrophic happening, no, we will not. Because if you look at just what's happened here in Montana in the Senate in the past 2 weeks, a whole bunch of energy bills came up in the Senate for them to vote on. We had, I want to say there was over 500 people, and I know there was over in person, and there were over 5,000 signatures from Montana supporting a new solar energy initiative that removes some of the
is now the global economy's Achilles heel.
restrictions on net metering to allow us, right now the limit is 50 kilowatts in Montana is the biggest system you can put up.
Narrow shipping channels.
And they wanted to up that up to 300 kilowatts. And that is across the board for anybody except a utility company. So, if you look at the Forest Service out at the airport, they have a 50 kilowatt array. They have some huge buildings out there. Their use is more than 50 kilowatts. My house, you know, if I use, it would be crazy if I put 50 kilowatts on my house. It's way more than I need, right? And I can see that messing with the grid. But the Forest Service and all those big buildings, that's only a very tiny percentage of their energy usage. And what they'd like to do is build a big enough system to build power their buildings and get closer to zero. And so we had several hundred people there in person at the Senate. Northwest Energy sent one lobbyist. Guess who won? Even though the entire Senate floor was just covered with all these people waving signs and chanting and cheering, the one lobbyist from Northwest Energy for Senate Bill 78. And guess what? We lost. Because of that one lobbyist. So that's the reason I say, no, in your lifetime you're not going to see it unless something changes, because the laws are written by utility companies for the utility companies.
That actually cycles into my next question, which is kind of a no-brainer, but do you think Trump administration is going to have
It's like the 2 points.
I don't think any politician is going to help any, no. Because the problem is within our structure, and our structure is set up. Yeah, it doesn't matter who the president is. The money, the laws are written by.
I could grab this area. This area behind it, and get the same thing for energy. So I can either look at it right now, what's the efficiency, or what was my efficiency in the last 1 hour?
Nigerian militants capitalize on by disrupting
Natural gas, I used to define efficiency.
another 5% of global supplies lost.
Instantaneous.
With 12% of
And because it's clean compared to coal.
We're also seeing that efficiency does not
After just 3 days, motorists begin
So what you'll see with Northwest Energy right now, they're doing a lot of wrangling with solar.
People are forced to seek other means of
But if you think about it, Wally's actually got the perfect cartoon for that. They're like, oh, you want to use oil? Sure, we've got oil, we'll sell it to you. Oh, you want to use coal? Sure, we've got coal, we'll sell it to you. You want to use solar? Sure, we've got solar, we'll sell, oh, wait a minute. We don't own that, so no, it doesn't work. And that's ultimately what it is. Northwest Energy is spending a lot of money on solar, they're putting a lot of solar. But don't think for a minute that Northwest Energy is out to save the planet. Northwest Energy is wants you to go out and put solar on your roof to save the planet. They're in business to make money, period. And where they're at is they're getting their foot in the door so they have control over solar versus
You will have to calculate where you are. So I've done that already. We've met some that more, so we'll just have to calculate the K-bar is, and that's
Our existing sources of energy are running out.
we're also going to charge the trade fees. We got basically all 3 of the energy economics, business guys, so energy that you know.
So if I walked up to you right now and said, hey, here's
energy.
yen, and that's a buyer or whatever.
It emits half the carbon of coal and 1/4 the carbon of
So
oil.
these peak reactors have values based on
Demand for gas
where you are
is
in kind of
The little lecture we
So
had
there's always some deficit
riding,
state.
so that's
It's expensive to transport.
plow, he was standing on the plow, every time he kind of bounced
So
back.
also,
He felt that as
as
energy.
soon as these mandates come down, shut down Colstrip, shut down Hardin,
So it's not
when
going
you
to
sell
sell
it as an energy ambassador of
you
multi-energy,
LNG in pressurized tanks. Enough to power a city like Boston, Massachusetts for a week.
he's got the money locked up
But a
in the
tank
coal
is
plants, which is
extremely
some way, so it's, if you want to put a new, whatever, energy installation, doesn't matter what it is. Someone's got to put that money up front, they want their money back, right? Where do you get the money back from? Well, it comes from the grid, so as long as you're buying electricity from that power, it'll come back. Well, he says, no,
It's going to operate for 8 hours a day.
Vaporizes.
So one more story for you, it'll kind of throw that along the same lines. you're familiar with Judith Gap Wind Farm,
Gas cloud becomes
out
highly volatile.
east of White Sulphur Springs, little ways. They put that wind farm in 2007, there's 97 wind turbines out there. At the time, all the hydroelectric dams were just kind of scattered different owners for all the hydroelectric dams in Montana. If you were watching the news a couple of years ago, they had new law that came out, Clean Energy laws, saying this year, 2013 or whatever it was, and I don't know, don't quote me on the dates, but you have to use 5% of your electricity for utility companies, it has to come from renewable energy. And then in 2014, 10% has to come, all the way up to now we're at 15%. It has to come from renewable energy, which is wind, solar, hydroelectric, geothermal.
Tankers in the US.
Pretty much those four are the big ones, you know, that's your requirement. At the same time, 2013, Northwest Energy bought all 9 hydroelectric dams in Montana.
Research has revealed that LNG tankers could become
Because
future
before that, they had to have 10% of their electricity, and Judith Gap Wind Farm was the only game in town. They had to buy 10% of their electricity from Judith Gap Wind Farm. They bought the hydroelectric plants. Now they have their own source of that 10%, or nowadays 15% of all of renewable energy. And guess what? You drive by Judith Gap, there might be 10 wind turbines out of 97 spinning at any given time. Because there is no requirement for them to buy electricity from them. So literally that's each one of those wind turbines that cost $5 million to set up. So $500 million in a wind farm that can't sell any electricity because the utility company bought its own renewable energy
MIT professor
to offset it.
chairman of the Massachusetts Port Authority, James Fay, published a
That's huge.
outlining the dangers of an LNG explosion in Boston Harbor.
Exactly.
I didn't even think government, I didn't think that they
You
played
just
that
have to
much
look at the
argument.
population of people out of doors.
Well, and you get into weird monopoly laws and what is considered a monopoly. And utilities are literally one of the few that are allowed a monopoly. And they do have a huge infrastructure, and you do have to support them so they don't collapse to a certain point. But at the same time,
Tanker carrying 33
the reason we have monopoly rules are so that people, or so that corporations don't get in that position where they are sole source and you have no choice.
Yeah, it's not like Berkshire.
Logan Airport in Charlestown, more densely
Correct.
populated.
Profit off of monopolizing.
Right.
Because Berkshire monopolizes.
As is normal when an LNG tanker approaches the harbor,
Right.
no other
And if you look at now,
security
what they're
is
doing,
tight.
this little electric block just put in, pretty good size, I don't know exactly what that size is, but they put in a solar array. They've got one in Lowell, and they've got one in Hamilton.
Here's my,
And they're allowed to do that, and they're not restricted to that 50 kilowatts because they are a utility company. Even though they don't own, well, now I guess they have their own producing, but before that, they didn't have any producing, they just bought on the common market. They bought the electricity to resell to customers.
if I were gonna go out and buy.
Northwest Energy, if they wanted to take everything out there in Target Range, buy all that property out there, and just put a field of solar panels all the way from here to Blue Mountain,
It ignites right in the other tanks.
I don't know how many kilowatts that'd be, it doesn't matter, I mean, you're in megawatts, gigawatts, you know, at that point. They can do that.
Cascade failure.
If a farmer owned a ranch, and that's not a small ranch, I mean, that's not uncommon, that would not be considered a huge ranch in Montana to own, you know, all of Target Range. If that farmer would go out and fill that field with solar panels, there's no law saying he can't put up solar panels, he absolutely can do that.
Somebody's making an old
He has no market for it. He can't connect them, exactly. Yeah.
Energy expands
efficiency of appliance.
But it's private investment.
Could, perhaps will, make the economy.
So if I want to put, and that's the reason you typically see 4 kilowatts, up to about 12 kilowatts is a really big house, is about the biggest you'll see for private enterprise, for people putting up for their own use. Right.
but it ignites
there is no reason, because you don't get paid for it, you just get credits. So during the day, I'm making way more electricity on my solar panels than I'm using. At night,
the gas
I'll get that back when I reuse it based on those credits.
to devastate the city.
Ballet.
That's
But-
an enormous fire. We've never
And
seen
only to
anything
the
like
extent
that.
that I can use electricity. I mean, I could put, I guess if I wanted to, I could put, you know, a 49 kilowatt array on my house, and just have like giant outdoor floodlights to run, you know, 24/7, just to burn off that extra electricity, so that I wasn't giving them free electricity. But the rule right now, as written, is if I'm giving them more electricity than I'm using,
Run a well.
that's theirs to do with what they want, it's free.
While this would
And I cannot sell it to them.
Efficiencies to build a cable.
So the law is written, and that's anywhere you go. That is not just in solar energy, that is anywhere you go.
To address the
The
growing need
laws,
for cleaner energy,
well, no,
plans
it's
to
not even,
back
I don't think it's even limited to energy. Anything that you do, that you want to do
this case,
in life,
We.
the rules
We
are
are now in a
written to
desperate race
favor
to secure enough
given
energy to
the
power our
industry,
future.
to favor the corporation.
rather than.
As the threat of global
Correct.
warming increases, there is growing pressure to reduce
All
carbon
the
emissions
study right now.
Yeah, exactly, and that's,
cleaner energy.
those laws are written to benefit them.
I've looked at the technology for coal, technology.
And there's a reason why we spend
Its impacts,
billions upon billions of dollars on lobbyists every year.
quite frankly, favor nuclear.
Is because they figure out how to work the system, manipulate the system, so you and I can't profit from it, but they can. It is to make the system lopsided and force it towards a monopoly.
In
You know, and every once in a while you'll see something in the news and there's a huge breakup. You know, they've gone after Microsoft for computers way before your time, but early 80s. I remember when they broke up Marvell because they said that's a monopoly for telephones, and now AT&T is way bigger than Marvell ever was. But, you know, they broke it. So occasionally you do see it, but that's not typically because the monopoly is too powerful. It's because somebody didn't get their cut of it.
How to operate.
And they go after them. Yeah, somebody got screwed and they're like, I'm not getting my money, so guess what, we're shutting you down.
Actually throw
Tim Chester.
One problem persists. The safety
So yeah, there's a whole lot going on out there, and
I was gonna say, this is further because that just pretty much my entire.
Well,
John
now we're
Lodge
gonna take on some writing.
world-renowned nuclear scientist.
Maybe Julie will try with,
intensely radio.
oh yeah, this is still running on, I haven't shut this down yet.
I was able to get.
Nuclear waste is transported in specially designed flasks that are tested to the limit.
So we can't finish up chapter 6.
The flasks could survive a 100-mile-per-hour train collision.
Well, I'm hydropower, and if you've been following the news at all, you might have heard that a couple of years ago, Northwestern Energy
According to John Lodge, that
bought
may
the
be their mental
dams.
flaw.
So if you remember, in the very early in Energy 101, we talked about the three categories of energy that we use. So there's primary energy, that's what's sitting out there in nature. That's what Shramsky was worried about, we're draining the Earth's
Such
chemical
conditions
battery.
could occur in a
There's
railway tunnel.
secondary energy, which is electricity flowing through the pipes typically, or natural gas flowing through a pipeline, or something like that. It's on its way from nature to your house or place of business or other technology. And then there's the useful energy, is what we're doing right now, running these computers, projectors, etc. So, Northwestern Energy is more or less in charge of secondary energy. They sit between you and Mother Nature.
Some of the cars
But what
were
they did when they bought the
red
dams, they said, oh, we
No
want
question
some
that's
money.
gonna take
It just
some
came
time.
up. So it just doesn't scale. Obviously, what we need to run this problem we need to
Nuclear
know.
power could offer a
if we just change
short-term
this.
solution.
We're given what
But
the
could we
head
harness
is.
the power from
So here's a shot
Not given
of
to
provide an
what this might look like.
source of energy?
You've got your reservoir upstream, this is
Let's
the
just go
cross
with
section, so you
Hunger
kind
for
of cut through the
carbon-based
mountain
energy
here.
is destroying our planet.
And here's your downstream, so
We
your
must find
water
new and safe solutions
is
to answer our
flowing
energy
through
needs.
this
And
guy,
I believe
and you can
water.
do a couple of different things. And so
just
your
see-
electricity comes in, and the piece of Gordon View, electricity will come in from the turbines.
And just look how the lights
Will
went
run
out.
the pump,
So the lights went out,
suck it up from the lower right and up to the upper room. Okay, well now the wind's not blowing, and everyone came home and turned on all their lights. Well, you could let it run this way, generate power, and then the electricity flows back.
And if a dam ever
And
collapses,
in a lot of ways, you look at this thing, so as long as the sun keeps shining, the rain keeps raining, and the wind keeps blowing, you will have this energy. And you've got a pile of water, sitting there at your disposal, rather than relying on the pile of coal, which gets smaller and smaller all the time. So, we can argue about perpetual motion, this is as close as we can get to a perpetual motion machine.
And,
but
yeah,
despite
it's,
the risks,
it's,
China, Argentina, Congo, India, Vietnam,
Yeah,
Mexico,
that is a good question. That definitely came up in the Gordon View conversations. It is amazing. The evaporation losses, they happen. You could say, well, gosh, I don't want any evaporation, and I'm going to count this thing. Others,
hydroelectric dam on the
additional
Santiago
expense,
River
but
will be one of the tallest in the world, more than
it's
700
going to be the same evaporation rates that you have in any other natural body of water. And they usually rate it in terms of acre inches. I think is the, it's like acre inches per day or acre inches. So if you see acres, oh, what's an acre inch? Well, it's, if you just grab 1 acre of this body of water, if that goes down by an inch, here's your number. And oh my gosh, I should show you these photos I took. I'll do that for break. I was just up at Flathead Lake. 12 people in one. I was standing on this beach, looking up, here, I'll show you. It was a trip. Thursday. This is just yesterday, so.
which raises water levels rapidly. Dangerous levels of water are channeled away safely by a spillway, a sort of overflow.